Good morning, philosophers. Let's continue reading 3-Minute Therapy. There are 3 kinds of musts, or irrational demands. We will meet each one of these many times in the following chapters. Must number 1, demands on oneself. Must number 2, demands on other people. Must number 3, demands on the situation or on the universe. Many therapists try to persuade their clients to adopt only realistic goals and to give up unrealistic goals, but even unrealistic goals may be harmless or perhaps beneficial, as long as they are viewed simply as preferences and not as demands. Suppose you have an unrealistic goal such as becoming the richest person alive, and you think, I keenly prefer to be the richest, and it's unfortunate that I'm not. And you want that at the 90% level, very, very much. Most therapies would say, holding that kind of unrealistic goal will cause you emotional problems. Think more realistically. Don't compare yourself to others and just aim to do your best. Then you won't feel so pressured. But such advice is wrong and could be harmful. It's wrong because you only have a preference, not a must. You will not feel disturbed about not being the richest person alive. It could be harmful advice, since high, lofty goals, no matter how unattainable, if viewed as preferences, not demands, motivate and add passion, challenge, and involvement to life. Great wonders have been accomplished by individuals striving for the impossible, and such striving doesn't necessarily make those individuals unhappy. In writing this book, our serious ambition was to have a national bestseller. Although the chances of this are small, such an unrealistic aspiration has helped keep us absorbed and engaged in our writing in a concerted, goal-directed way. Disputing shoulds and musts. Merely pointing out to sufferers that their musty, demanding thinking is responsible for their emotional problems will rarely dispel those problems. Even if the sufferers agree, they will probably still fall into their old, demanding thought patterns, unless they take a further step. Hopefully the stream to the new channel is going well. This is the first official stream. The most effective technique is for the sufferer to identify the specific must or irrational demand which causes her problem, and then to actively dispute that must. The person could write out an exercise each day in which the musts are listed and the reasons stated why they are groundless. Often, examination of a person's habitual judgments reveals that they are unwarranted demands, and looking closely at these judgments is all that it takes for the sufferer to see this. But sometimes it's necessary to argue persuasively with the sufferer. This brings us to another distinctive feature of 3-Minute Therapy. It involves arguing or debating. As a therapist, I'm liking it already. As a therapist, I debate with my clients, appealing to their reason to get them to look at their situation differently. Anyone using this book had... Go ahead and shut the door for me. Nope. Please shut the door. Thank you. Alright, sorry about that. My office had silently filled up with children and dogs. And then I turned around and noticed there were a lot of people in the room. I debate with my clients, appealing to their reason to get them to look at their situation differently. Anyone using this book had better be prepared to debate with themselves. Many therapists refuse to argue or debate with clients, not recognizing that the client's own intelligent mind can play an active role in the cure. It's important to dispute your musts actively. Anyone who has tried to grasp or memorize material in a hurry, such as a student before an exam, knows that merely reading through the material is not very effective. It's better to be actively engaged, for example, by writing out the material. Then it's more likely to sink in. 3-minute exercises. Throughout this book, we will be giving 3-minute exercises, which follow an ABCDEF format. Let's see how these exercises work. Suppose you feel angry that Jake doesn't admire you. A. Activating event. Jake doesn't admire me. B. Irrational belief. Jake must admire me. C. Emotional consequences. Anger. As we have seen, it's the must that's making you angry, not just the lack of Jake's admiration. Instead of a must, you had a preference. If instead of a must, you had a preference, you would feel sensibly sorry and displeased, not foolishly angry and infuriated. Thus, the question becomes, how do you eliminate the must and thereby eradicate your anger? Answer: D. Proceed to D. We set up a hypothesis, then look at the evidence for and against that hypothesis. By using the scientific method, we're merely employing a more systematic form of the common sense method of trial and error. We do this as young children who are always making guesses about the world, forming hypotheses, then modifying or abandoning these guesses as they get more information. D. Disputing or questioning the irrational belief. What is the evidence Jake must admire me? What's the evidence for my must? Or, in our example, why must Jake admire me? The correct response often comes as a surprise. There's no evidence for this must, or for any must. No reason exists that Jake must do other than he does, however desirable I might find it if he did. So now, you have moved to E, effective new thinking. I prefer that Jake admire me, but I can survive quite well if he doesn't. It's true that you find it unpleasant, that Jake doesn't admire you, that you would like it better if he did admire you, and perhaps even that it's wrong of him not to admire you. But the universe is not so constructed that people always do what's right or what other people would prefer them to do. Therefore, it's unrealistic to expect that this must be bound to occur. And unreasonable to demand that it must occur. Furthermore, when people demand that something must occur, they tend to think that something terrible happens when it doesn't occur, that this is intolerable or the end of the universe. They express this with words like awful, horrible, appalling, or dreadful. But the plain truth is that although you don't like that Jake doesn't admire you, you can survive quite well without Jake's admiring you. Having replaced your B, your irrational demand that Jake must admire you, with E, your reasonable preference that Jake admire you, you will then begin to experience F, new feeling. Regret or disappointment, but no anger. Practice repetition reinforcement. A common way to begin learning to swim is to first rehearse the correct strokes on land. That's a useful preparation, but you will never become a competent swimmer by that method alone. You'll just thrash about awkwardly in the water. When the correct habits have become ingrained after much practice on land and in the water, then you can call yourself a swimmer. It's the same when learning a language, Italian for instance. At first, you speak Italian mechanically and haltingly. You don't expect to speak fluent Italian after one lesson. You keep practicing and increasing your skill, programming your brain and body with the correct habits. After you become thoroughly familiar with Italian, you feel it and live it. Italian becomes, quote, second nature to you. The stages you go through in order to think straight and feel good are comparable to the stages of learning swimming or Italian. At first, you make an effort to perceive that your musts are irrational, illogical, and self-defeating. Later, you will deeply believe and feel this to be true. The way to improve is simple and clear-cut, but not easy. Practice, practice, practice. Continuous and meaningful practice is required. More is better. As with swimming or Italian, once you've acquired the skill and really feel it and believe it, you're not finished with the discipline. You're sure to get rusty and experience setbacks if you don't continue your reinforcement. Compare this with brushing your teeth. Suppose you brush and floss your teeth conscientiously twice a day for a year, then visit the dentist and she exclaims, "No cavities!" Do you abandon brushing your teeth? Clearly not. You know full well that if you do, the plaque and bacteria will slowly creep back in and start their dirty work. That's because humans naturally and effortlessly manufacture plaque and bacteria as a never-ending process. It's the same with your musts. As a human, you're a must and should creating animal. You find it easy to take those preferences that rate as important to you and make musts out of them. It's in your genes as well as in your upbringing. You don't have to be taught either to build plaque or to invent musts. You don't have to be taught either to build plaque or to invent musts. True, you can make the plaque build up worse by eating junk food, and you can make the must build up worse by practicing and reinforcing your musty thoughts. You should have picked a different word than musty. Might as well have called them moist thoughts. It's like a gross word. Oh man. Good morning. On the other hand, you can halt and reverse the buildup of plaque or musts by brushing and flossing, or disputing and questioning regularly. Similarly, your facility in speaking English would start deteriorating should you move to Italy and speak Italian exclusively. Even with your native tongue, a lack of practice will make you rusty. If you don't wish to get rusty, keep practicing. If you just read this book through and nod your head in agreement, you may find it entertaining, and it will probably give you some slight help. But that is not applying the method of 3-minute therapy. The big returns will come only from applying the exercises to your own problems, such as writing out the exercise and perhaps then reading them into your phone and listening to it frequently. When you learn the basics of 3-minute therapy, it may not immediately translate into feeling and acting significantly better, but as you conscientiously practice, you'll progress to a higher level of skill, and the rewards will come. 3-minute therapy will then become a tool for you to quickly think yourself out of emotional pain and turmoil. People often come to therapy believing that they can finally and permanently People often come to therapy believing that they can be finally and permanently cured with no further work required on their part. For most, this is not realistic. People are naturally inclined to irrational, demanding thinking, and it's advisable to combat this inclination by performing the exercises indefinitely, just as it is advisable to keep on brushing your teeth. Once the basic understanding has been gained, future analysis and correction of faulty thinking will usually require no more than 3 minutes as the occasion arises. All right, it seems like chapter 1 was basically the book. I'm assuming the rest of the book is just going to be applying it in different ways. So let me make an early attempt here. Yesterday I had, like I was telling you guys, I had a encounter with a court for the local cartel about some victimless crimes that they had charged me with. And I decided, rather than playing, I've gotten good at playing the court game and getting out with paying less, or even having the charges dropped sometime. But this time I chose to try something different. I chose to try what I call a jurisdiction gambit. This is something I learned from a couple people that you can find if you go look at the Disenthrall channel. You can find an interview called something about magic spells. You can search for it and find it, but it was a technique that challenges the court's jurisdiction using their own legal language, which of course they don't have valid jurisdiction, because of course you never actually signed any documentation consenting to be inside their jurisdiction. And so from a real sense, the challenge makes sense, but of course no one challenges courts' jurisdictions because everyone assumes in the just authority of the government, and so I generally have zero faith in these what I call them magic spell strategies. To you go into court and they're casting their legal magic spells at you, and you're trying to use their own magic spell system against them, and it always fails because, of course, magic isn't real. It's just guns and they'll say whatever words they need to say to make themselves feel better about pointing guns at you. This one seemed different because it seemed so simple and straightforward. All you do is you go in and you ask the judge if the evidence has provided any evidence regarding jurisdiction, which of course they don't, because they of course can't, because it doesn't exist. And when they don't, you can move that the case be dropped because the prosecution failed to file a proper case, which, if they were legitimate courts, they would recognize as a problem, and because they're of course not legitimate courts, they don't give a shit, and they react emotionally. And the judge got upset at me, of course, and I probably gave him a bad day, but that's okay. He gives a lot of people bad days every single day. But if I had played it differently, I could have probably resolved the entire thing today for probably half as much money as they were demanding. Or maybe even have pled not guilty, and what I normally would have done is plead not guilty, take it to trial. The cop, may or may not even show up, and if he doesn't, then you just get off free. And if he does, then you can usually cut some kind of deal for a reduced fine or some shit, and then you close it out for less than you would have had you just paid it. That's what I usually do. This time, though, I tried this technique, and pissed off the judge, probably pissed off the prosecutor, and they actually forced, I didn't even know they could do this, they forced a not guilty plea onto me, even though I was telling them that, if they could just answer the question, then I'd be happy to plead guilty. Anyway, long story short, they entered a not guilty plea and set a trial date, and now I've got them pissed off. So the chances that I'm going to resolve this case for less than the full amount of money that they're extorting from me is much lower now, likely. I don't know. At this point, I have nothing to lose, really, so I'll probably continue trying the method just one more time to give it a good run, maybe get some good YouTube content out of it, and move on with my life and just call this an expensive lesson. But anyway, yesterday, wow, I just talked for 4 minutes about to set up the point I was trying to make. Yesterday I was bothered because every time I interact with this invalid system of authority, it irks me significantly, and I was upset, and I was anxious all day. Like after it was over, I was just sort of semi-angry and pissed off, and angry that I have to deal with these violent thugs, angry that they actually think I'm the criminal and they're the good guys when the precise opposite is true. You know the whole thing. Like I'm just grumping about it all day. So now I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the ABCDF format, and I'm just trying to fit that rubric into it. So A, the activating event is criminal thugs attempt to extort me. B, what's the irrational belief about that? Irrational thugs. No, let's see. See, you could bury. You gotta be careful with this. Let's see. Thugs will never extort me, or must not extort me. I don't think there's not a problem with must not. Maybe the best way to say that would be should never is still true. Must never is true. Will never. That's probably the irrational belief. Thugs will never attempt to extort me would be the irrational belief. That is irrational because they do to all of us, right? So then we have C, the emotional consequences. Well, anger, anxiety, more anger, anger. And in this case, a higher fine amount probably than I could have gotten away with. So more extorted money. D would be attempting to dispute or question the irrational belief. What is the evidence that thugs will never extort me. Well, there is no evidence for that. Why must the thug never extort me? Well, I don't think that's a valid way of asking the question, because I don't know. So it seems like this might be weak to moral arguments, because moral arguments do provide demands and musts. So maybe I'm doing something wrong. Well, no. So it's an irrational belief to expect bad people to never do bad things to me, and we know that from the Stoicism. It's hard to disagree with much of anything in this book so far, because it's been very in line with something that I very much disagree with from the Stoics, and you guys are familiar with that. Anyway, so effective new thinking would be, I prefer thugs not extort me, but I can survive I can survive the experience. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's true. I need to think on that more. Anyway, applying this is going to be interesting. I'm probably going to have to work on figuring that one out a little bit more. Or maybe we'll have Elstein back on the show, and he can walk me through that specific scenario. Wow, this show's going long. Let me finish up quickly. My thought for today. Oh, yeah. I wrote down, truth between and for people you care about strengthens good relationships that are with good people, and harms bad relationships with bad people. Without making this video run too much longer, what I mean by that is, when it comes to a relationship or a person you care about, I have yet to see truth be a bad thing. Truth might trigger pain in yourself and other people that aren't awake to the difference between their perception and reality. But that's where the pain comes. It comes from their gap between their perceptions and reality, not from the truth. And so if you're in a good relationship or a healthy relationship with a good person that cares back about you in return and that wants to also be a good, virtuous person, when you give them truth, they might experience pain, but the actions they take following that will be to work with you to close that gap between perceptions and reality in a way that preserves or strengthens the relationship. And if you do that with a bad relationship, an unhealthy relationship, or with a bad or unhealthy person, they will not respond by taking actions to heal the relationship or to close that gap between perceptions and reality that existed that caused the truth to be painful. And so what the truth will generally do with those people and with those type of relationships, it will weaken the relationship. It will drive those people away from you, which is an amazing thing. That is the power of truth in a big way. You go through life, if I care about you, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to be honest with what I think, what I feel, with the truth that as I perceive it, as accurately as possible. You know, I'm not saying go around being bluntly asshole about, telling you truth and what I think. That's not what I'm saying. I just mean in a genuine, calm, good intentioned way. And if I focus on doing that, which is something that is almost 100% within my power to do, to go around being honest with people, if I focus on that rather than on trying to maintain relationships, I find that the relationships maintain themselves and the bad relationships kill themselves. And so, like, if you focus on maintaining good relationships, that's not really a concrete goal that you can have a direct effect on. It's like waking up in the morning and deciding that you're going to fall in love with somebody that day. That's not a goal that you can really, it's not a concrete goal that you can necessarily achieve. Or in the inverse would be to say, if you set out to locate bad relationships and end them, that's not really a concrete goal. A concrete goal would be to be truthful in all of the relationships that you care about, and that truth will strengthen the good ones and decimate the bad ones. That's what I was thinking about today. And I always add that caveat of, be truthful in the relationships you care about, because if you have a relationship with a bad person that is a threat to you in some way, then you know you don't always need to be truthful with people that are enemies, you know. And that lesson was from 48 Laws of Power. Anyway, all right. Wow, long morning think time this morning on the new channel, but I guess that's good. It's the first one. Guys, have a great day, and share this channel. Let's get it out there. The new channel, Think Time, is on YouTube and Odyssey. I'll probably keep up the Twitter Disenthrall Periscope, and we'll leave the recordings on SoundCloud going forward. But yeah, if you enjoy this content, share it with people. Let people know that this new channel exists. All right, guys, have a great day.